Welcome to Learn Biology, and today we'll be discussing the cell cycle. What is the cell cycle? Well, the cell cycle is a method used by cells to produce exact copies of themselves. So if we have a cell here, it's going to split into two cells. So this splits into a new cell, and this is known as the cell cycle. And the point of this is to replace old cells, so replaces old cells, injured cells, or worn out cells. So it keeps our bodies new by replacing messed up cells. So that is the cell cycle. And it is split into three main parts. Interphase, which is known as the growth stage, where the cell spends most of its life. So most of its life is the interphase, the growing stage. We have mitosis, and then we have cytokinesis. What we need to understand before we move on are some vocabulary terms. We need to understand chromatin. This might be familiar to biology students, but those who don't know, chromatin is loosely coiled DNA. So loosely coiled DNA. So chromatin would look something like just a jumble of loops. This is something chromatin would look like, and it would have proteins in between called histones. So loosely coiled DNA with histones. That is chromatin. Then we have chromosomes. Chromosomes are tightly coiled DNA, and this might look familiar to some of us. It is what is shown in many biology textbooks. It looks something like this. It's two semicircle looking, it's like an X simply, and that's chromosomes, tightly coiled DNA. So this is converted into that. So chromatin goes into chromosomes, chromosomes can turn into chromatin. But chromosomes are made out of chromatids and the centromere. This central, is known as the centromere. And the parts of the X are known as the chromatids. So chromatids, and these are known as sister chromatids. So sister chromatids, and that's just the name given. Now what we also need to understand is that the cell cycle, the parts of mitosis are undergone by somatic cells and diploid cells. These are simply cells known as body cells. So mitosis is undergone by body cells, and diploid cells simply mean two copies of each. Like if we of each chromosome, which means that let's say we have chromosome here. This is one chromosome. Diploid cells have two of each chromosome, so they always occur in pairs, and this is diploid cells. Somatic cells is another word for body cells. All the cells in our bodies except from our sex cells, such as sperm or ova. So that is what we need to understand. So the first step of the cell cycle is known as interphase. This is known as the growth stage. This is where the cell spends most of its life maturing, so that it can be be duplicated. So interphase is known as the growth stage. That is very important, growth stage, and it is split into three parts, which are gap 1, synthesis, and gap 2. So in gap 1, what simply occurs is that the cytoplasm is increased in the cell. So if we have a cell here that is about to be duplicated into 2, it needs twice the amount of cytoplasm so that the second cell is an equal size. So let's say we want a cell of this size, okay? So what's going to happen is that the cell is going to swell up. Let's say this has a radius of 5, just 5. We'll not put units on that. And so it's going to double and have a radius of 10, so that when it splits, it's going to be 2 equal parts with radius 5. So that is why there's an increase in cytoplasm. Then we have synthesis, where genetic material is duplicated. This is where DNA is replicated so that both cells have the same DNA material. They're exactly alike. Gap 2 is the final stage of interphase, and this is where organelles are duplicated. So cell parts such as Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, ER are all replicated so that both cells are exactly alike. So the cells are like clones, and this is the first stage of interphase. This leads us on to the next stage, which we'll discuss in our next video.